Hair today, gone tomorrow. This video is going to be all about hair. I get a lot of questions and comments here on YouTube or on Instagram all about inking hair, drawing hair. I get it because hair is one of those things that is kind of like an elusive structure. It's like drawing or inking water or clouds or something like that. It's not like a solid object. And because of that, it can be really confusing and frustrating to draw. It could also be kind of freeing too, because there aren't any like hard and fast rules specifically. There's just different approaches and ways of going about it. And I think sometimes the best way to learn how to draw anything is to look at how other artists go about that particular subject. And that's what we're going to do in this video. We're actually going to look at 3 different artists, comic artists, illustrators. We're going to look at Mark Schultz and some of the work from his Cenozoic comic series. I have this collection here. We're going to look at Paul Pope, one of the great brush inking comic book artists, cartoonists. And we're also going to look at someone we haven't looked at on this channel yet, Cyril Pedrosa. I'm not quite sure if I'm saying that right, but this is a graphic novel that I've had for a few years now, and he's just an incredible artist. There's some amazing artwork in this book. I think Spanish artist, this is from Spain, but that's the way we're going to go about it in this particular video. I've made other videos about inking hair, drawing hair, little tutorials, my particular approach, but this video is going to be centered on how other artists do it. And hopefully we could get inspired and get some ideas and bring that into our own process when we're dealing with drawing and inking hair. So before we dive into these books and look at these artists, I also want to let you know that at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a little clip, and it has to do with my approach to inking hair. It's from a tutorial, longer process video that I currently have up on my Patreon. I was doing a series on my Patreon recently, and it's called How I Make an Illustration. And I pretty much take you step by step through the whole process from beginning, where I'm collecting sort of like inspiration and ideas about how I want to approach a particular illustration, all the way to the final illustration and every step of the way in between. It centers mostly around penciling and inking, and in this little clip that I'm going to share from that larger series, I focus on one little part of it where I'm talking about inking hair, and I thought it would be perfect for this video. So I'm going to share that at the end of this video. If you're interested in watching that full series on my Patreon, I'll leave the link below to my Patreon if you want to sign up. I'd love to see you over there. I share a bunch of other stuff, process videos, other types of tutorials, Q&As, all that kind of stuff on the Patreon. If you don't want to sign up to the Patreon though, or you don't feel like you could commit to something on a monthly basis like that, that particular series, How I Make an Illustration, is going to be for sale on Patreon, but for non-members. So I'll leave that link in the description as well. So this way, if you just want to get everything that class, tutorial, process series has to offer, you don't have to be a patron. You could just buy it outright. Anyway, I'll show that video or a clip of that video at the end of this video, but before all of that, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into looking at some of these incredible comic artists, cartoonists, illustrators, and their approach to drawing and inking hair. Mark Schultz, along with many other things worth studying of his work, would be his rendering and depiction of hair. He's just a real classic illustrator and comic artist, and he has a really classic approach to rendering, especially in black and white. And if you're trying to figure out how to draw and render and ink dark hair specifically, he's your guy. One of them for sure. He kind of has that really classic approach to it with just some beautiful feathering and lights and darks, and blending those really, really well, balancing them really, really well. It's hard to look at Mark Schultz's work and not want to talk about everything, all the different aspects of his rendering with ink. I mean, look at these beautiful backgrounds here, just incredibly lush. We'll, at some point or another on this channel, look through this Cenozoic collection of comics. Let me know in the comments if that's something you want to do sooner than later. But right now, we're going to try our best just to hone in on the hair. This is a really great example of that just classic feathering. I'd imagine this is inked with a brush, and just the use of black and white and that waviness to suggest volume and just three-dimensionality in his hair. It accentuates the overall realistic depiction of the characters as well when the hair is rendered in such a way. Maybe realistic isn't the right word, but believable. You know, the way the drapery is rendered and drawn, the way the characters and the scenery is lit. This isn't, you know, photorealism, but it's drawn and illustrated in a way that is believable and helps bring the characters to life. And this is one of the harder things to do, is to show characters with dark hair and dark shadowing against a black background. And, you know, the age-old question of, do you put like a halo of white around all of them, or do you let them sort of just like bleed into the background the way he does right here? And I like the fact that he lets it bleed into the background, except for the hair, where he puts that like rim lighting. So it's not necessarily like a halo or a white outline. It's just sort of like a rim lighting against the black background. And that helps bring them forward and pop off of that black background with the use of just the hair, which is really, really nicely done. The cool thing about this Cenozoic collection is that this particular series that Mark Schultz drew, there wasn't that many issues, maybe 12 issues or something like that, but it was drawn and released over the course of many years, maybe like a decade or something like that. So his style was evolving with each issue. These weren't like monthly comics. So every issue and every story, the style would evolve quite drastically and make really big leaps in terms of his ability, as well as, you know, his the style that he's picking to draw these stories in. And this is a little bit earlier in the book, and so there's a particular style that he's rendering in here, and you can see, I'll just skip to later on in the book, and things get even tighter, including the hair. I mean, look at the feathering on that hair right there. This is probably years later at this point, and he's getting even finer details and much more delicate with the feathering all over, but particularly in the hair. This is actually a really great shot because this character's fingers are running through his hair right there. It just feels so believable and real. Here's another great example of that delicate, fine line rendering in the feathering on the hair right there. I mean, look at that. That's just expertly done. I'd imagine he's not flying through these pages. Probably one of the reasons why Cenozoic took so long to come out. This is more of like an art project than it is, you know, a fast monthly adventure comic. But more than anything, this is an artist's artist, and certainly an artist's comic. You can tell he likes to draw a full head of hair. Even the guys have long hair here. I mean, why not? If you could ink and render hair that well, I'd be drawing everyone with thick heads of hair as well. Perhaps this is a little glimpse at what it might be like if Mark Schultz illustrated a Superman comic right here. Almost looks like a up-close shot of Superman. Look at this panel right here, feathering on feathering, just beautifully done. There's like an abstract quality to hair when you just look at it and you remove it from the figures and the faces. It almost just looks like it could be abstract exercises in brush strokes, or it could be ocean waves or something like that. And when you apply that to the full head, it really gives such personality and stylization to the characters. This is certainly a tighter approach to inking hair. This wouldn't be for everyone. I'd imagine that this was a very, very slow process for him, the inking of the hair. Just a whole page of his work here. I can't imagine he's inking one of these in a day, that's for sure. I'd imagine that just the hair alone on this tier of this page right here, that could take a couple hours easy. These are very carefully placed and carefully thought out lights and darks of hair. and he's using it in certain instances to differentiate the character from the background and give it a real nice visual pop. And just to show you the distinction between, like I was saying earlier, earlier on in the book, this is much more earlier on in the series, the style evolves as it goes on, and you can see, I guess in relative terms, how much more, I guess, crudely inked some of this hair rendering was as compared to some of the later stuff. Again, this is really beautifully done. I think any of us would be happy to render hair in this way. But just as an interesting comparison, here's an earlier shot of from the Cenozoic series of hair, really, really beautifully done, same character. And then here's a much later, many years later, version of that same character, and you can see how the rendering of the hair just got tighter and tighter and much more controlled, as did the style overall. And if you were ever going to study Mark Schultz's work, maybe a good exercise to do would be to try out his earlier style and approach to rendering hair, which is a little bit more looser and more graphic and, I guess, choppy, for lack of a better word, and then try out his more controlled, finer line and see how you like the process between the two and the outcome. Cyril Pedrosa. This book is really great. It's a graphic novel called Equinoxes. I've been wanting to talk about the artwork in this book in a video for a while. I definitely will look at this book in a little bit more detail in future videos, but for now we're going to hone in on his particular way of drawing hair. Very, very different than, I guess, your more traditional comic book aesthetic to drawing hair. So let's take a look. The cool thing about this graphic novel in general is that because it's called Equinoxes, it's divided into 4 different chapters, and each chapter represents a different season. So fall, winter, spring, and summer. And with each chapter and with each season, the style of the story changes. The characters stay the same though, but the way he sort of renders them and the colors that he uses, the palette changes dramatically, which I think is really, really cool. But in this earlier chapter, I like this more scratchier line quality that he's getting, and especially with how the hair is rendered. You can see here, very, very different than perhaps like a Mark Schultz. It's just completely different style and aesthetic. And that's certainly the case in their approach to rendering and drawing hair. I love that little sort of scratchiness to the hair that he gets with those very few strands that he's indicating. He's able to just get the whole gesture of the hair. And he's also able to distinguish between different textures and different color hair that I really, really like. Again, without having to like overly render anything. Both are using like a scratchy line approach. But with every character he draws in this story, not only is their overall design different, but everything all the way down to the way he draws their hair is different. I particularly like the openness and the lack of lines that he uses for the characters with lighter hair or gray hair in this instance. He's really able to get across the volume and texture just with these few little, I'm assuming like pen lines. Every bit of his art is a shorthand for something in reality. And the more of a shorthand it is, the more cartoony and abstract and expressionistic it is, the more it almost feels real. It's a weird thing that happens when you're able to kind of like jot this down quickly with less thinking and less lightboxing and over rendering. There's something about it that almost feels more real than the stuff that is super labored over. No one is going to mistake this for photorealism, that's for sure, but the hair, all this hair feels very real to me. Even down to the styles that he picks, the different hairstyles to distinguish between the characters. This is cool too, just a little quick little storytelling use of lines here where this main character just woke up, and we know that because obviously he's in bed, but just to further tell that story visually, he just uses some more expressive lines to show that his hair is a little bit more messed up. A real simple thing that can very easily get overlooked, but in cartooning, little things like that go a really long way in sort of like just subconsciously communicating to the reader time, place, atmosphere, all those little things. Makes the character just come to life that much more. Okay, we looked at Mark Schultz, then we looked at Pedrosa, and maybe a blending of those two approaches, the tightness of Schultz and the looseness, expressiveness of Cyril Pedrosa. Maybe if you put those two together, you get Paul Pope, at least for hair rendering. Paul Pope is one of my favorite comic artists and cartoonists, and we actually looked at this book in a video a while ago, a few years ago at this point. I should do another video on this book because there's just some really great black and white ink work in here. When you talk about black and white, heavily lush inked, brush inking comics, you can't help but talk about Paul Pope. He's definitely someone who puts brush inking front and center in his work and in his comics. And that really shows through, particularly in the way that he inks hair. Perhaps a great opportunity to highlight hair in a comic is to draw it when it's wet. And there's a really great like underwater scene in this comic, and we really get a chance to see how Paul Pope inks wet hair and gives it that motion and wild, energetic texture that happens when hair of a certain length gets wet. And it's in scenes like this that he could really let that ink and the brush just sing. Not to mention the way he renders the water in this whole scene. I mean, it just feels alive. You could hear it crashing and moving the characters along the page. I mean, look at the liveliness of the inking of the water. But this is a hair inking video, so we'll try to stay on topic here. It's really cool to see that in the midst of his bold brush inking lines, he gets these really, really thin, almost scratchy lines with perhaps a thinner brush, or maybe it's the same brush, and he's just using the very, very tip of it. But there's a really great opportunity when inking with a brush, whether you're drawing a character with wet hair or character in the wind, where you can really let that brush kind of just flow and use it from all different parts. The thicker side of the brush to the very tip, just to get the full range of texture and ability that the brush can accomplish. And like I said, this is perhaps a blending of the two different approaches, the Mark Schultz kind of lush brush inking, and then the scratchier, more random, looser, cartoony lines that Pedrosa accomplishes. This is perhaps a nice happy medium between the two. This is that same character here with his hair dry, and you can see it's done with a little bit more of a thinner, controlled line. Not as wild and crazy. But the cool thing about this comic is that it centers around the main character, who is like an escape artist. He's like a circus act. So not only is he drawn in water, but he's drawn upside down quite a bit. So you get to see great examples of like hair falling and hanging in different ways. I mean, this right here is just a great study. This could be a great study to do of hair. When you zoom out, you get a really quick read, a very believable, obviously exaggerated face, but believable in the way that it feels like he's hanging upside down and the hair is going with him. And then when you zoom in, you get to really see all the different types of lines that he's putting down, these random, more scratchy lines on the side, and then these much more kind of very, very brushy outlines. I sometimes describe hair, strands of hair, and drawing them as like, noodles or, strands of pasta. And in Paul Pope's case here, it almost looks like flames in a way, like it has like a fiery look to it. I think it's just interesting to have sometimes those visual analogies when it comes to hair, because hair is such a complex thing to draw and to ink and just to capture in general, just because there's all these millions or trillions of little strands on your head. And so it has to be simplified one way or another. And if you could kind of make it analogous to something else like pasta or flames, it could help you kind of visually simplify that and capture it better and make it more visually interesting for you to draw and for the reader to kind of understand. You have facial expressions, you have the gesture of the figure, and let's not forget also the hair. All these things could enhance the storytelling and bring your character to life that much more. All right, so I hope you got something out of looking at these three different artists and their unique ways of approaching drawing and inking hair. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I'm gonna share a short little clip from a series that I currently have up on my Patreon called How I Make an Illustration. This little clip is gonna focus around inking hair, very specific for this video. I'm gonna show this clip right now. If you wanna sign up for the Patreon, you could do that in the description. I have the link down there. Also though, if you just wanna buy the class and this particular series outright, you can do that as well over on Patreon. So without further ado, here's that clip. Thanks so much for watching as always, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. When I'm penciling hair and penciling all the rendering in the hair, it's really just more of a suggestion of like the light source and where I want the lights and the darks to be, but then it's really up to me to kind of create a brand new interpretation right on top with the ink. Because I found that if I try to be too loyal to those pencil lines underneath, especially with the hair, it starts to lose the necessary kind of gesture and life that those lines for hair specifically need. Those pencil lines underneath as a guide, just to kind of suggest where I want the lights and darks to be. But other than that, I could kind of, ad lib around it, on top of it. You gotta let the hair kind of fall the way it would naturally. It's random. All right, let's work on her hair here. With hair, it's really like the direction that you pull the lines in really helps suggest the direction that the hair is moving in. So her hair is kind of like pulled back into a sort of like a loose ponytail. So I'm just gonna turn the page around and try to pull those lines in that direction so that it just better helps suggest that direction. And very much like when you're trying to paint water or clouds, all these kind of like random shapes in nature, you kind of just have to be, it's like organized chaos in a way. Don't be afraid to move the page around to get the best lines you can get. Some lines will come out better if you do them in a pulling motion, and some will come out better to push. So move your page however it will best give you the best advantage. And I'm going to pull in some of these lines into the hair a little bit more, some of the lines from this pen, just to kind of bring this thing together even more. Just little areas here and there, little accents with her hair as well. Just some random strands here and there. Just give it a little bit more life and character.